You are a human trafficker, aren't you? All right, we are going to get out of here. At the end of the day, every single person in that warehouse is going to try to break into Britain.
You then actually managed to connect with a people trafficker, or two, in fact.
Three, yes.
People traffickers. How on earth did you do that?
We are in a powder keg. People are sick of being lied to. We all know what the reality is, and you can't hide it anymore from people. Instinctively now, ordinary members of the public feel as though when something happens, they are going to be lied to about it by politicians, the police, and by authority figures. That's a very dangerous situation to be in. The argument is won at the moment. Everyone with eyes in their head can see that there is problems here and that you are right to be frustrated and angry about it.
Hello and welcome back to UnHerd. All the talk at the moment in the media is of a so-called summer of riots. Tensions around the issue of migration, of asylum seekers based in hotels, of illegal small boat crossings, and the rest of it is really dominating here in the UK. But what is happening on the other side of the channel in France? What is actually the situation on the ground where a lot of these asylum seekers are coming from? Well, a certain reporter called Patrick Christys from GB News went there. He went into some of these camps and even managed to connect with a people trafficker or two. His reporting was quite extraordinary, and I thought we needed to get him into the studio to hear more about it. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. It's a real honour to be here. This is great. Thank you so much.
So, I just want to touch on some of these moments. You went with the camera crew to the place where many of these asylum seekers and migrants are assembling in order to plan their trips over the channel.
You are a human trafficker, aren't you?
هذا
Yes. Why are you bringing people illegally to Britain?
Go.
Why are you bringing people illegally to Britain? So if you have a look just quickly, right, because we've got your face, we've got your face here, and we've got your phone number, and we know everything about you. We know your name, Rama. So why are you illegally bringing people into Britain? Why? Do you make a lot of money out of it?
So what was the vibe? What did you learn from that?
So that's the second time I've been there. The first time I was there, I actually did my entire live show from there, throwing to various different clips. And actually the vibe then was kind of all right. So mixture of people, you mentioned Somalis, yeah. First time predominantly was Sudanese men. And we were able to talk to them and get some really quite interesting interaction about what they were expecting to get in Britain. And what that reveals was categorically the main reason they were coming to Britain was because of the very generous benefit system. They were of the mind that this was a total land of milk and honey. They get a house, they get absolutely everything. So
that first time around they were talking in English and happy to speak?
The Sudanese have better English than any other group of people that I'd met when I was out there either time. So that was the first time. But then when we went back this time, totally different vibe. And there were still a lot of Sudanese. There were quite a lot, I think, of Ethiopians and Eritreans as well. And there was instantly much more resistance and aggression towards the camera. What they were all doing was taking out their phones straight away and filming, and you were surrounded. And then they send up a bit of a shout when they see a camera. They start kind of making noises and holler to each other, and you can hear it reverberate around this warehouse, which was actually just quite an immense thing to have going on all around you.
Well, quite intimidating for you, I would expect.
A bit. Look, hey, I am sympathetic to the idea that some of these people are desperate not to be on camera, and you have to tread very carefully there. You know, again, optics-wise, whilst I think it's really important for people in this country to just see the reality of the situation, and the only way to do that is to go and film it and get in amongst it, I also didn't want to come across like I was just steaming in there and, you know, really harassing people. But I think fundamentally we have a right to know. I mean, at the end of the day, every single person in that warehouse is going to try to break into Britain and is going to try to access our benefit system. So I do think it gives me the right to ask them certain questions. So yeah, went in there, much more aggression. No one wants to talk to me. And then if someone did start to talk to me, the people around them start hammering them. They start going, no.
Why do you think there was that shift? Do you think they've become kind of wise to the politics around it?
Yeah, because the reality is that most of them are, in my view, not genuine asylum seekers. So I've got no doubt that their home countries are much worse than Britain, and that they would get a much better life in Britain, and that maybe they had to flee their own country for a particular reason, but there's no need for them to come to Britain, right? And so what I think they've been aware of is that since I went the first time, which was about 2 months ago, other journalists have turned up, and it's being highlighted that actually they're here to kind of access the benefit system. They get really unfortunate things as far as they're concerned on camera, which don't do their cause any good. And I think the message has gone round, possibly from charity workers, definitely from fellow migrants or human traffickers, etc., that they should not speak to anyone in the media at all, just in case they say the wrong thing. They're quite rough.
Yeah.
That's right. And I would have very serious doubts that any of the people that I interacted with, either in that warehouse or in the camp, are genuinely going to go on and contribute massively to Britain. I did not get the impression at all that this is a warehouse full of qualified engineers and medical professionals. That's simply not the case.
I think that's a quite safe statement.
Yeah, well, it is, but some people find that incredibly controversial. But just go there and see it.
And I think, look, I watched the clips. I thought they were quite extraordinary, and it just gives a very clear sense that this is a group of people from very far away countries who, in many cases, don't even speak any English, and they are not the people that you would necessarily choose in a kind of points-based system.
No, and no women and children at that warehouse at all. No women. That was entirely men, and it was entirely men the last time I was there. And we do have to have that conversation, I think, about different cultures and how quick to violence they are. So, they were throwing a lot of stuff at me, especially from there was like an overhanging bit of this warehouse where stuff started coming down. That was the point where we really had to get out there. I got hit by something, and we had to go. And then they were throwing things out there at me as well, and surrounding me. And I do think it is symptomatic of different cultures from around the world where there is more of a rush to aggression and anger, and we have to then have that conversation about whether or not we want that here in Britain.
Also, I don't think that, I've got to say, is controversial either. I mean, if you're right that they were from Somalia, Eritrea, Sudan, these have been war-torn for decades. The Foreign Office will advise against travel to most, if not all of them. They're very dangerous places, so at the very least, they've grown up in an environment where violence is just widespread, and it would be completely counterintuitive that they wouldn't bring some of that with them.
The different vibe from last time to this time was, last time I think there was a little bit more of a slightly jovial atmosphere about, well, we're coming to Britain, we'll have a chat with you about it. This time it was, we are coming to Britain, we're getting in, and that's that. And that mindset, again, you have to think, well, if they did get to Britain, if they were going through the asylum system and were threatened with deportation, and people were saying that we're going to get rid of you and send you back to France, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that they would be willing to resort to whatever tactics they could use in order to stay in Britain. And I don't think, if you look at that warehouse, just imagine that within a couple of weeks, I think there's a very good chance that almost all of them are going to be in Britain. They'll have either taken a lorry or they'll have come in across a boat. And when they are divvied out around the country into a variety of different asylum seeker hotels, or wherever they are allowed to roam free, do you want men like that hanging around your local town centre? I would suggest not.
The other strange thing that you pick up from your reporting is that there's this whole sort of ecosystem around these warehouses and where a lot of these migrants are temporarily housed, mainly in tents, that is almost encouraging them.
Absolutely.
There are these charities that no doubt feel like they're there for good reasons, that are there to try and minimize danger and support people who are in a difficult position. But in effect, what you found is that they're pretty much giving people a how-to guide to cross the channel.
Some people say that maybe you are, in a way, like helping the human traffickers. And what group do you work for, out of interest?
We're just not going to speak at the moment.
That's interesting.
Okay.
This is a manual on how to break into Britain, isn't it? And it's just stuck here on the side of a water container. And look at them. I'm not surprised they're driving off. Yeah, I've always been fascinated about that link or the question between what is helping people and what is actually helping to facilitate someone's illegal entry into a country, and actually posing that question as to whether or not they are helping human traffickers. Are these charity groups actually a link in the chain when it comes to people breaking into Britain?
So what are they actually doing? They've got little stalls out?
So they have little stalls. So there is a bit of food and tea and biscuits like you would expect, giving some people some sustenance. But then on the side of the water coolers and dotted around the place are how-to guides about how to get in a lorry, who to call if you get into difficulty, what type of lorry that you should be looking to get, what some of the potential dangers are, then also about what to do if your boat starts getting pushed back in the water, everything. And that was a manual on how to break into Britain. And
I mean, they would no doubt say, I feel like I can hear their press spokesman already calling me up, and they will say, it's not a how-to guide. We know that this is happening, and therefore if it is happening, it should happen safely if we want to minimise fatalities. Therefore, we're going to point out the most dangerous aspects. What's the argument against doing that?
Well, the argument against doing that is that they are doing absolutely nothing to discourage people doing that. In fact, I would say that there is an element of encouragement, and I think that these people just don't really think it through. So, for example, there was one lady, I mean, we've blurred all their faces, and there's a question mark about whether or not we should have done that, I don't know, but we blurred all their faces, and there was one girl, particularly a woman, British girl with a very plummy accent. I did pose the question to her, statistically speaking, in that warehouse full of men there probably is going to be like a rapist or a murderer or someone, not all of them at all, so just statistically speaking. And have they really thought it through, especially as a woman? Do they think they're doing the Lord's work and they're doing the humanitarian work? Whereas, can they live with themselves if someone that they have helped and maybe someone that they've pointed in the direction of that guide about, oh look, this is if you're going to do it, here's how to do it safely. If they go on to commit a crime in Britain, do they lose any sleep over that? And I'm not convinced that they've really thought that through.
I think they'd be allergic to any idea that you can kind of judge a whole group by a statistical idea that there might be a bad apple among them. But we can get them on and have that argument subsequently. You then, which to me was the most extraordinary aspect of your reporting, actually managed to connect with a people trafficker, or two, in fact. Three people traffickers. How on earth did you do that? How did you get their number?
So, firstly, TikTok is the main tool in our armoury. They advertise very blatantly on TikTok. Some of them you would have to direct message on TikTok and then move it over to WhatsApp. Some of them just have their WhatsApp number on their TikTok profile. So if you just go on TikTok and you start finding a couple of videos of people crossing the channel, then you're into like illegal migrant algorithms then. So your TikTok will recommend to you other people who are doing the same thing.
So TikTok is actually also facilitating people trafficking.
It is. And we've gone to TikTok and the National Crime Agency in Britain as well and given them the TikTok profiles of like anyone that we've found. Some of them have been shut down, but then they just pop up again. There's nothing actually stopping them doing that. So once you start messaging them, they very, very quickly will start sending you locations about where they are. So we didn't want to jump the gun with that. I was aware that I was getting to northern France on the Sunday morning and initially started to make contact with a couple of them on the Friday. And then on the Sunday morning, I stood by a beach and just live filmed me sending my live location to every one of them that I had in my contact book. Within 30 seconds, one of them had got back to me with a different location. And then by the time...
What message do you say I am... You write in English? Are you pretending to be from somewhere else?
I wrote in English with an English phone number because we did get a couple of burner phones, but we couldn't get a French SIM card or anything like that. So they don't care about that. There's no alarm bells for them when it comes to why is this guy speaking in English. So I had to be quite careful about this because I was conscious of the fact that most of the human traffickers that we were able to contact had either Iraqi or Afghan numbers. So if I said that I was Kurdish or from a country in the Middle East, there was a good chance they would speak my language. So I couldn't say that. Also, I am visibly not Sudanese. So I couldn't say that either. So I decided to settle on the Vietnam side of it. We've known that historically there was quite a big issue, I think a couple of years ago, where most people coming across the channel, according to official statistics, which I'm a little bit sceptical of, said they were from Vietnam. So I thought, right, well, they're not going to speak Vietnamese, and they might not be initially put off by the fact that I've got lighter skin colour on my hands if they were to see me or something like that. So that's what I did. But really, there were no questions asked. There were no questions asked. It was, okay, here's a location. And then we started getting a run of these locations in. We got to the hotel, I got changed. We went straight out there, and from the moment that we touched down in France to the moment of meeting the first human trafficker, it was probably an hour, maybe.
So they turn up on what kind of grounds? Are they then offering services? Are they giving you quotes? What's happening?
So you'll get quotes. The going rate at the moment appears to be around €1,500 to cross the channel.
Which is cheap.
Well, I think so, yeah, really, to break into a country.
Historically, there were reports of £15,000 being charged. €1,500 it's affordable.
It's got cheaper. It's got cheaper. They'll give you that location. You get there. Well, I hung around a little bit. I think from people, just to give them a bit of context, there is just a massive area around Dunkirk, in between Dunkirk and Calais, a massive area with the largest camp. And across that is like a couple of main roads and a bit of a flyover. And they're all in around there. So first one sent us a link to that flyover bridge. So I just plonked myself there, waited for not that long, and then you get maybe asked, okay, what are you wearing? And you might be given a name of someone.
To identify you.
To identify me. So I had quite a distinctive white scarf on.
Was the idea that they would pick you up there and then and take you to a boat? Or were you going to do the deal there?
So they are in the camps. So what I think really they were going to do was take me into wherever camp they were there, and then maybe have a bit more of a discussion. And then the boat crossings would have been when the weather was good, normally very, very early in the mornings. The weather was really bad when we were there, which was good for us because it meant that the camps were fuller. So they would have been of the mindset that we would have hung around with them probably for a couple of days, and they'd take us to a particular location, and then maybe give us the nod, early one morning as and when that boat was ready. I would have loved to have been able to, say, spend the night with them and get that, but I mean, there's just some very obvious practical reasons why that would not have happened. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to take it to its full conclusion.
When you did actually meet them, you immediately revealed your identity and tried to have a conversation with them.
We'd had a conversation with our lawyers before, and we kind of decided that the best thing for me to do, really, if we're filming them straight away, is to immediately reveal who we are and what we're doing.
In each case, they then ran away? Or what happened?
Yeah, we'd caught them on the hop, really, and they obviously weren't expecting it, which was good because I think it meant that there was not that initial level of violence that you might have got or we were expecting, because some of these human traffickers, and it was one of the main reasons we went over there, on their WhatsApp stories and some of their TikTok stories, they're posting ISIS propaganda, they're posting videos of them with these heavy-duty assault rifles, weapons, all of that. So these are bad people, the actual human traffickers. They then send their foot soldiers to meet me. I mean, I would class them as human traffickers as well. They're facilitating it, and that's what they're there to do. They all shot off pretty quickly, one of them quite comically scampering off into some woodland, losing a shoe on the way.
And you give the details to the French police?
Yeah, gave all the details.
Did they follow up? Have there been arrests?
We don't know if they followed up and been arrested. What we do know is that the morning after we produced our footage that went out on Monday night, so Tuesday morning, there was a raid from French police in one of the camps that we'd been. But the French police now have the phone numbers and various identifying features of 8 or 9 people that we provided them with. And it was when I was in the French police station, actually, I wasn't sure what reaction I was going to get. And they didn't know I was coming. And
were you filming that?
I had a microphone on and our camera was outside. So we have picked up. We chose not to play the interaction of me in a kind of interview room with French police, just because they didn't know we were filming. We just wanted it for our own protection more than anything, in case someone said, we didn't really do that, did you? Well, we did, and we've got the receipts. But they were actually really quite nice about it. Like, they said, thank you for giving us this.
But I mean, the obvious question is, if you were able to find the phone numbers and physically meet up with 3 traffickers in one Sunday morning, you'd think it'd be pretty easy for the French police to do that, and apparently they're not.
There was absolutely no evidence of it. And when I was in these camps and when I was in the warehouse as well, I didn't see a single French police officer there. And again, as one of the clips that I've got shows, there is a clear and obvious path to a beach from which you can launch to Britain from the main camps, and there's not like a fence up between that and the beach, which for the best part of £1 billion, which the British taxpayer has given to the French, I would have thought as a token gesture they might have been able to put some kind of barricades up there. But
so obviously there's not a kind of maximal effort to prevent this.
There's just
this
not.
happening.
There's just not, no.
Moving the conversation back to what's going on here in the UK, here in England, there's a talk now of a summer of riots. You'd think this talk might be coming from kind of right-wing YouTubers, but actually it's coming from Angela Rayner as well as Nigel Farage. It suddenly is this sort of quite eerie theme that everybody seems to be signed up to before it's necessarily even happened. I think the quote, which was put out from the cabinet, from the Prime Minister's spokesperson, Angela Rayner said at the cabinet table, economic insecurity, the rapid pace of deindustrialization, immigration, and the impacts on local communities and public services, etc., declining trust in institutions was having a profound impact on society. How bad do you think it is? And how likely is this? Or are we just talking ourselves into it?
Yeah, I'm very concerned about the idea that we might be talking ourselves into it. And I don't like that. I don't like the idea that we're all preempting something and gearing up for it. And then people, if something does happen, people might be able to say then that people like you and I talking about it, or Nigel Farage talking about it, have caused this. I mean, just quickly, yesterday, at the time we're filming this anyway, yesterday, the Chief Constable of Essex Police gave a press conference about what had been going on in Epping. And I was watched with some interest as I think The Guardian, Channel 4, maybe LBC and The Times as well, all asked their questions about Nigel Farage and about certain political figures, referring to Nigel Farage, trying to get the Chief Constable of Essex Police to say that Nigel Farage was whipping this up. To his credit, in what I thought was actually a very weak press conference, this guy did not say that. He was not willing to say that. He says he's not controlling what political leaders do. But I think that shows you the mindset of large chunks of the British press that are desperate to pin this on people, as opposed to dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is that we have now seen that 1 in 100 people, according to a Sun investigation, in asylum hotels in Britain are wanted or have been charged with a crime, or the fact that we are now seeing sexual assaults at a larger rate, in my view, from some of these hotels. They didn't want to ask the questions about that. They were already trying to preempt it and therefore be able to pin it on people like Nigel Farage for, in their views, causing what they think is definitely going to be a summer of disorder. Just to answer the kind of other part of your question on that, though, yes, I do think that we are in a powder keg. I do think we are. And the reason why we are is because for decades now, people have not been listened to about legal immigration and people have not been listened to about illegal immigration. And we have been asked, well, we've not been asked, we've just been told to put up with a huge amount of stuff in various different communities. There's massive hotels that are popping up everywhere, pretty much, and next to schools in many cases, where locals know that there is crime taking place. People know that some of their children have been affected by this, or that the local women have been affected by this. And if you back people into a corner and they feel as though the institutions or the authorities are simply not listening and not protecting, you would argue, the most vulnerable in society, i.e. your wife and kids, then how do you expect people to react? And I'm not, certainly not condoning, I don't want people lobbing Molotov cocktails into migrant hotels and all that stuff. You don't want any of that stuff. But do you not expect public anger when things like that happen? I mean, would it not be an unnatural response to all just go home and drink a cup of herbal tea and go, gosh, that was a bad day out at the migrant hotel, wasn't it?
So how do we kind of keep those two ideas in our heads at the same time then? Because I would say on your first point, which is that for too many years, overwhelming public sentiment about migration has not led to the outcomes people want, which is a reduction, not an increase, right? And people are completely outraged that we seem to be unable to prevent the boats and the illegal entries. That, I think, is now almost... That argument is won almost. I mean, the fact that you've got the Labour government signing up to it, I mean, they are now attacked from the left for signing up to this evil Tory or far-right narrative. You know, the Green Party is actually doing very well because a lot of people think that the Labour Party is now too right-wing on immigration, right? So it's almost like the political argument that something needs to be done about this is now not controversial anymore. Do you agree with that? Like, that part of the argument has almost been won.
Yeah, and the annoying thing, as far as I'm concerned, about why that argument has now been won is because it's become so big that you can't hide it anymore. So initially, they were able to disperse certain people around areas where there was already maybe a very dense population and a very dense migrant population, so it wasn't immediately obvious that there all of a sudden was like 300 Afghans that had just arrived at this hotel. But then because those hotels are full and the problem's so large, they then have to disperse them into other areas where it's more noticeable. And you can't hide this problem anymore about crime or about issues there. Again, one of the main reasons why I think there is this powder keg situation is that people are sick of being lied to. So by people in politics or by authority figures or certain police forces where they've been told that, oh no, there's been no spike in crime here, or we're not seeing any issues, or that there's no integrational problems, or that there's no risk associated with this, or that there's no harm to the British taxpayer, even economically. Oh, come on, it's just a small amount of money that we're spending on these things. All of those things are now redundant. It's gone. It's all rubbish, right? We all know what the reality is, and you can't hide it anymore from people. And I think that breakdown in trust with authorities, if you feel, and this is a depressing reality, but I think it is a reality in Britain at the moment, which is that instinctively now, ordinary members of the public feel as though when something happens, they are going to be lied to about it by politicians and by the police and by authority figures. And that's a very dangerous situation to be in, if people feel as though they're just going to be lied to about it.
Do you think, though, that at this moment, where the kind of big picture argument is almost or has been won, it is more important than ever to not allow the kind of bad actors to take over? Because all that does is it kind of vivifies the idea that it's all a far-right conspiracy, or that it's all Tommy Robinson trying to make trouble or whatever. You know, let's think about the current genuine riots and unrest that there has been over the past week. This started in Epping, this most recent bout. That seemed to have genuinely started from parents, people connected to a local school who were very upset about this migrant hotel that had someone who had actually been charged with sexual assault living in it, right? That's the basis of this unrest. But as so often these days, because these riots become this kind of multimedia theatre, you then get lots of other people coming in to join it. You probably get people who are trying to kind of hijack it for their own purposes. And it becomes quite complicated to untangle it. I mean, how do you do that as a reporter, as someone you're on GB News all the time talking about these issues? How do you say, okay, well, this is the real bit, and these guys are people we should distance ourselves from?
Well, it can be tricky, as you've identified, just by the straightforward nature of it. Slight pushback, really, on whether or not what we saw in Epping was a riot. I mean, there is a slight distinction, I think, between riots and a bit of disorder. I think one of the things that stood out for me and has been highlighted in the Epping situation is if you end up with a load of local parents, which we had there, saying things like, you know, protect our kids and save our girls or whatever, you know, and there were a huge amount of just middle-aged women in that protest there, and I don't really think that, you know, people think that all of those mums are far-right, bad faith actors. And I think if you do think that, then you're a bit of a nutter, actually. But then what the Epping thing showed was that there is an incredibly well-mobilised stand-up to racism / Antifa / Socialist Workers' Party type thing that is able to mobilise very quickly and get to all of these different locations at the first time, that concerned parents might be standing outside a hotel saying, do you mind like not touching our kids, please? And if the police are escorting them to those areas, which they did, they walked them from...
Because there was some pushback on that. Let's just explain that to viewers and listeners who might not have followed it. There was footage that emerged online that appeared to show the Epping police literally escorting in police vans some of these sort of anti-protest
so that was their pushback. So
they said that was false.
Yes, so that's a really important distinction, right? So they said that they bust some of them out of there for their own safety.
Yeah.
But they did physically walk them.
But you accept
in
that
from
the
the
bus's
station.
part was false?
Well, yeah, they didn't bust them in.
Right.
They bust some of them out.
But
Farage
did jump on that and share that footage and say there should be resignations at Essex Police. This is outrageous based on the van's footage. So he got that wrong?
Well, I think he's admitted getting it wrong. I think what I would say to that is I don't really know if that matters that much, like whether they physically bust them in or whether they walked them in. You know, there was the same end result. So if they are doing that, and I'm hugely sympathetic to the idea that we live in a free society and that people should be allowed to protest, and if it had been the shoe on the other foot and there had been a load of, say, stand up to racism people who'd made it to the hotel first and were out there, and then some local people wanted to go and voice their displeasure, and that involved them meeting at the local train station, would I be really opposed to the police then walking them to their destination? It's a very grey area, that. But if you do already have concerned local people outside a hotel in what everyone is aware can be a very volatile situation, absolutely has the potential to erupt, should police really be walking the opposite side of that group in? And this is important as well. When they get there, they have these standard chants, a lot of the kind of hard left lot, which, like Nazi scum off our street, and some really quite vile stuff. And when they were shouting that at parents and indeed children who were in that crowd outside the hotel, I can see how that enrages a lot of people. And it's easy to react to that. I'm not saying it's right to react to that, but it's easy to react to that in a way that rival football fans would. And a good analogy might be if there was a load of West Ham fans somewhere, would the police walk the Millwall fans up towards them?
So I'm not going to now make the case of the Epping police, but I feel like I have to just explore it. I think that the principle, which I guess must be right, of good policing of these very tense situations is to keep opposing groups separate and not allow that clash to take place. And that I think I would support, if that's the best policing practice. So I suppose their defence would be, if you've got these kind of two almost like armies or groups of people who are very strongly opposed, you want to make sure that they don't end up actually clashing.
Yeah.
So some kind of escort or dividing line seems reasonable.
Yes, it does seem reasonable, and I think I have a lot of sympathy for the police. I mean, I've given the police some police forces a little bit of stick over recent years, whether it's been getting obsessed with the kind of diversity stuff, whether it's been the pursuit of these non-crime hate incidents, and all of that. Your actual general kind of Bobby on the beat on the ground, I mean, I've got no doubt whatsoever that those police officers that were there at that moment in time did not really want it to kick off. I'd find that bizarre if they did want it to kick off. I probably didn't really want to be there. I mean, they must have been thinking, gosh, I might have a wife and kids or a husband and kids at home, and, am I going to get out of this safely tonight? So I am very sympathetic towards that. But what it's done, ahead of this conversation that we're having, that Angela Rayner's having, that everyone else seems to be having, about this idea that we're going to have a summer of disorder, well, then we need to right now, have a plan of action in place for how we police these very similar incidents. And are we going to continue to see situations where people from Stand Up to Racism or whatever groups they might call themselves are escorted by police towards protesting parents and people and concerned locals? Because if they are, what I would be very worried about is that then could turn a lot of people against the police as well. And then you end up with a really messy situation where you've got people who feel as though they're against absolutely everything, and then that feeds into this powder keg narrative, and I think could be a very, very, very dangerous situation. I think police forces right across the country right now need to have a clear plan in place about how they're going to deal with this going forward, because there's no room for error here now. There's no room for error, I don't think. We can't have that.
I wonder whether the actual distinction, maybe between us or maybe between lots of people who might agree on the kind of underlying facts and the political argument that illegal immigration is too high, that these people should not be sort of encouraged to cross the channel in that way, and all the rest of it. The distinction, I wonder, is whether you are sort of observing and semi-encouraging these clashes to take place, because politically, for some people, they will bring the question to a head. And I think you would find a lot of people say, almost certainly in private and sometimes even in public, that, the world, the government, the elites, the authorities have to see how angry people are. We need this to somehow break out into a crisis in order for the change to happen. A lot of people, I think, on the political right would sign up to that. And the other point of view is the political argument has almost been won now. Now, surely is the time to try to avoid riots and clashes that lead to basically making it easier to demonize people who are worried about immigration. Like, that for me is an important
What I
distinction.
would hate to see, and I dare say you would as well, I suspect most people watching and listening to this would hate to see an easy excuse for people to do nothing about illegal immigration again. And I think last summer, because there was serious issues at certain places like the torching of a migrant hotel or things like that, what that allowed Sir Keir Starmer to do, and other people to do, was to basically broad brush everyone as being far right. And that allowed this ridiculous evening that we had of the far right riots that I don't think were ever actually going to happen. I mean, I was live on air that morning, and we initially had a thing that came through about like 4 or 5 locations where, you know, like fully signed up Nazis were going to turn up and kick the living daylights out of us. You know, town centres were being boarded up. And then all of a sudden that list became like 100 locations. And I remember seeing that come through on the wires, and I was like, what? So where are all these Nazis coming from? You know, where are they all? And I've got no doubt there are bad people. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there was one bloke walking around with a swastika on his back, which is usually quite a strong indication that you're not a nice guy, right? So there was a bit of that. But the overwhelming bit of it was concerned people. What I'm very concerned about is, I think that our political elites, especially people on the left, and they currently happen to be in government, and you also have to take that up to the Attorney General as well, who has got a very interesting political/legal track record there, are desperate for a situation to happen where they can call everyone a racist and then do nothing about the problem. Yeah. Right? And it's going to be very tricky to avoid that. It's going to be very tricky to express your, I think, quite righteous outrage and concern and fear. A lot of people are very scared. A lot of young mums are very scared. A lot of people are scared for their kids. To express that without having a situation where something kicks off and then we see a press conference from Keir Starmer again, or local police forces blaming it all on the far right, and then you end up with these pictures from like Walthamstow with a load of people with the Stand Up to Racism banners, and you get that uni front page that we had that evening.
It kind of paradoxically, this summer, you know, if you care about reducing immigration and you care about these problems finally being tackled, what you don't want is riots. You don't want riots. You want to be Gandhi-like. You want to be Nelson Mandela-like in your restraint and making sure that you're not fanning the flames and trying to bring it to a head. Because if there is some terrible clash and people get hurt, the opposite might well happen, as you said.
Well, that's incumbent on people who are at these things. And, you know, look, I've seen footage from things like the Epping protest. I knew a few people that were there as well, who were saying to people who maybe got a bit whipped up by the situation, just saying, all right, keep it calm now and try to do your best. And I would urge people. And by the way, we're preempting stuff that might not happen, but I mean, everyone, including Angela Rayner, seems to be telling us it's definitely going to happen, so we'll go off that, right? If something does happen this summer outside hotels or whatever, I would really urge people who are there, who feel passionately about it, who feel very angry about it, just if you start to see it looking like someone's there to act in bad faith and start, you know, lobbing a petrol bomb into one of these places, something like that, please do try to get hold of them and stop them, because that will really diminish the argument, which, as you've rightly identified, is one. The argument is one at the moment. Everyone with eyes in their head can see that there is problems here and that you are right to be frustrated and angry about it. If it then gets to a position where there's huge amounts of violence and people are getting killed and, you know, things are being thrown through windows of migrant hotels, all that we're going to see is press conferences calling everyone far right, the left jump onto it all, you know, various parts of the media jump onto it all, and they will just try to silence you for like another year or until the next time. And, you know, it'll play into the hands of everybody who is saying that who is desperate to not stop the migrant crisis, basically.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you one final question. It's pretty much the hardest one of all, so I'll leave it to the end.
Here we go.
What is the solution? Because every day we find, it's a smash the gangs approach by the government. You've met some of these so-called gangs. They don't seem that easy to smash. This morning, I think we heard there's a new idea they were going to sanction gang leaders or people involved in these people trafficking gangs as if they had kind of well-known bank accounts and large amounts of money in them. Didn't seem very convincing to me either. Is there anything that you do think is convincing in terms of actually at the core, practically, to fix this problem?
Yeah, mass deportations of people who are here illegally. Unless you are willing to do that, you are not going to smash the gangs. Because what this tinkering around the edges of, we'll freeze some bank accounts, or we'll get the French to maybe stop a few boats in the water, or the Germans, getting rid of a warehouse full of boats that's somewhere in Munich or whatever. The core aspect of their business model is if you can get someone to Britain currently, there is an overwhelming chance that they're going to stay. So whilst that exists, you're not going to stop the flow of people. There also has to be a mindset change. There has to be a mindset change of people in positions of power, whether it's David Lammy, Yvette Cooper, or Keir Starmer, and possibly the Attorney General as well, where all of these people are being taken advantage of by these sick, warped human traffickers. That is the complete warped way of looking at it. They're not. They are desperate to come to Britain, and there are people who are willing to provide them a service. Now, I'm not going into bat for human traffickers. Some of them are obviously violent individuals. Do not get me wrong. And people die in the Channel. But it's not as if there's a group of people sitting in Calais and Dunkirk who have woken up one day and been transported there against their will and are being, herded onto these boats against their will in order to get to Britain so that they can go and work for Deliveroo. That's not the case. They want to come in. So there has to be a mindset change, and there has to be deportations. And that probably involves leaving the ECHR. It probably involves us caring less about sending people back to countries that are currently war-torn, like Sudan and like Afghanistan. That's ultimately, for me, what it's going to take.
There was a scheme that Macron and Starmer seemed to agree on when Macron was here for the state visit a couple of weeks ago, where there was a kind of swap-see scheme. So basically, for every migrant who arrived illegally in a van or on a boat, they would send that person back to France, and meanwhile they'd take a legal asylum seeker in exchange. That actually seemed to me like quite a clever idea. If you could, without this ridiculous cap, apparently it was limited to 50 people a week, which completely makes it irrelevant. But if you did it without a cap, why is that not quite a good scheme? Because if everyone knew they'd be deported back, they'd have a better chance of coming legally, then pretty quickly that would be a disincentive.
Yeah, well, firstly, it's a question of whether or not people believe that every single person who arrived on these boats, bearing in mind there's been days when we've had close to 2,000 of them, plus the people arriving in lorries, which we actually don't have solid data on, but anecdotally must be quite significant. So it's whether or not people believe that sceme would have really existed anyway. So there's that. The other side of it is there's a potential for it to make the problem worse, which is that it's more of a magnet to get to France. It's more of a magnet to get to those camps, because if you can just stay there, these people that are coming across on the boats might get sent back, and then you can come to Britain. What was missing from that scheme with Macron and Starmer that I saw was initially what was being briefed out was that you would only be able to come to Britain legally or through a safe route if you already had a family member in Britain. But then when they announced that scheme, they didn't say that in that. So that implied to me that you didn't have to already have a connection to people in Britain. So that was another deterrent that could have been removed there that wasn't the case. And the idea of what it is now, which is it's a pilot scheme with 50 people coming. I mean, I did kind of make a point when I was in that warehouse and there's like hundreds of these people around. I was kind of shouting into the ether, but I did say, apparently Keir Starmer's going to deport 50 of you. And really what I was trying to do there was show, well, you can get rid of 50 people, but it's not going to make any difference there. That scheme for me, I think, just a lack of believability about it. Practically speaking, does it remove the deterrent for people to get to northern France? No. And those for me are some of the key aspects. And what was the barrier of people coming to Britain and being allowed to be sent over legally? We've also seen that with the Afghan situation that we had recently, that big expose, it turned out they weren't actually vetting. There were people that came over there that had not been vetted or had previously been refused asylum. So if that's the system that we're working in now, do people really trust that the people that the French are sending over, safely? How do we know that none of them are going to be a problem as well?
Patrick Christys, could go on all morning, but I'm going to let you go. This is the big topic. It is the big question of the age, it feels like, and you're doing great reporting on it. So great to chat.
Thank you. No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Cheers.